My sister called my son names at every family gathering while everyone stayed silent, so I secretly collected proof of her husband's affair and her own dirty secrets, then exposed everything at my parents' anniversary party. I'm going to tell you about how I destroyed my sister's perfect life, but first you need to understand how we got here. Delilah and I grew up in a household where appearances mattered more than anything else. Our father Richard was a successful corporate attorney who believed that his daughters were reflections of his own accomplishments. Our mother Patricia came from old money and never let anyone forget it. They raised us in a beautiful colonial house in Connecticut with manicured lawns and strict expectations. Delilah was older by 3 years, and she learned early how to play the game. She got straight A's, dated the right boys, went to Yale, and married Kevin Montgomery, a man whose family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Northeast. They had 2 children, Olivia and Nathan, who attended private school and took tennis lessons at the country club. I took a different path. I went to art school, which horrified my parents. I dated a musician named Tyler who had tattoos and drove a motorcycle. We never married, but we had Lucas together when I was 25. Tyler died in a car accident when Lucas was 2 years old. We weren't married when it happened, which meant that in my family's eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had a child out of wedlock. Delilah never let me forget it. The comments started small, little remarks about traditional families and proper values. She'd talk about how important it was for children to have both parents looking pointedly at Lucas. At Christmas, she'd mention how blessed Olivia and Nathan were to have a stable home environment. During Easter brunch, she discussed the importance of marriage before children, her eyes finding mine across the table. But it was at Lucas's 9th birthday party that everything changed. I'd invited the family for cake and ice cream at my small apartment. Lucas was so excited, showing everyone his new bicycle and his art supplies. Delilah arrived late, sweeping in with expensive gifts for her own children and a token present for Lucas, a coloring book clearly meant for a much younger child. We were all in the kitchen when Lucas accidentally knocked over a glass of juice. It shattered on the floor and he immediately started crying, apologizing over and over. I was cleaning it up, reassuring him that accidents happen, when Delilah leaned down to Olivia and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is why bastards need proper discipline." The room went silent. Lucas looked confused. He didn't know what the word meant, but he understood the tone. My mother busied herself with cutting the cake. My father checked his phone. Kevin suddenly needed to take a work call. Nobody said anything to Delilah. I asked everyone to leave. Right then, Delilah acted shocked, playing the victim, claiming she was just concerned about proper child rearing. My parents sided with her, saying I was being oversensitive and ruining Lucas's birthday over nothing. Lying in bed that night, listening to Lucas ask me what bastard meant, something inside me shifted. I'd spent my whole life trying to be the bigger person, absorbing Delilah's cruelty because confronting it would make me the problem. I'd let my family's silence enable her because speaking up would disrupt their precious peace. No more. I started paying attention, really paying attention. When you look closely at someone who presents a perfect facade, you start to notice the cracks. The next morning, I called in sick to work to spend the day thinking. Lucas was at school, and the silence in my apartment gave me space to process everything. Tyler's photograph sat on the mantle, and I found myself talking to it like I sometimes did when decisions felt overwhelming. "She's not going to stop," I said to his picture, "and they're all just going to keep letting her." Tyler would have confronted Delilah immediately. He never had patience for cruelty disguised as concern, but Tyler's direct approach had often made things worse with my family. They dismissed him as crude, unsuitable beneath their standards. His death had almost seemed convenient to them, a problem solving itself. I thought about confronting Delilah directly, having a private conversation where I demanded she stop, but I knew how that would go. She'd deny everything, twist my words, make herself the victim. My parents would mediate by telling me to be more understanding, to consider Delilah's perspective, to not make waves. The pattern had been established over decades. Something bigger was needed, something that would make ignoring her behavior impossible. I started documenting everything. Every family gathering from that point forward, I recorded on my phone. I kept a journal noting dates, times, and exactly what Delilah said. I saved text messages where she made snide comments about single mothers or children born outside marriage. I collected evidence like a lawyer building a case, which made sense given how my father had raised us. This documentation phase lasted about 2 months. During that time, I attended every family event with new eyes, seeing patterns I'd been too close to notice before. 3 weeks after Lucas's birthday, we had Sunday dinner at my parents' house. It was a tradition they insisted on maintaining, despite how uncomfortable these gatherings had become. Delilah arrived with homemade dessert and her usual air of superiority. During dinner, she mentioned that Olivia had been chosen for the lead in her school play. "We're so proud," she said. "The director told us that children from stable homes tend to be more confident performers. Something about security, allowing them to take creative risks." She looked at Lucas when she said it. He was picking at his mashed potatoes, trying to make himself smaller. "Lucas is very creative," I said evenly. "His art teacher says he has real talent." "Oh, art?" Delilah said dismissively. "That's nice for a hobby, but Olivia is developing skills that will serve her in the real world. Public speaking, confidence, leadership. Lucas has those skills too." "Does he?" "I wouldn't know." He barely speaks at these dinners. She laughed lightly. I suppose children sometimes retreat when they sense something is wrong with their family structure. My father changed the subject to his latest case, and my mother busied herself serving dessert. The moment passed like all the others, absorbed into the family's collective decision to pretend everything was fine, but I had it recorded another piece of evidence. Delilah's marriage was one of those cracks. She and Kevin had been together for 12 years, and from the outside, they looked like the ideal couple. But I started noticing things. The way Kevin would check his phone constantly during family dinners, a small smile playing at his lips. How Delilah would snap at him over minor things, her voice sharp with something that sounded like desperation. The separate bedrooms, they claimed, were because Kevin snored. During Thanksgiving, I watched Kevin excuse himself 3 times to take calls. Each time, Delilah's jaw tightened a little more. When he returned from the 3rd call, she asked sweetly, "Important business on a holiday." "Just the dealership," he said. "You know how it is." "I do know how it is," she replied, but there was an edge underneath the sugar. Later, while helping clean up, I overheard them arguing in the hallway. Kevin's voice was low and defensive. Delilah accused him of being distracted, absent, checked out of their marriage. He countered that she was controlling and impossible to please. Their voices rose until they remembered where they were, then dropped back to angry whispers. When they returned to the living room, both were smiling, the perfect couple once again. But I'd seen behind the curtain, and now I couldn't unsee it. I reached out to an old friend from art school, Jasmine, who now worked in private investigation. Over coffee, I explained the situation, and she agreed to look into Kevin's activities. I felt guilty at first. This was my sister after all. But then I remembered Lucas's face at his birthday party, and the guilt evaporated. Jasmine was thorough and professional. She built her business on discretion and results, serving clients who needed information but couldn't afford public scandal during the gathering process. We met weekly at a small cafe downtown, far from anywhere my family might see us. "This might take time," she warned during our second meeting. "If he's careful, tracking his movements without alerting him requires patience." "I have time," I said, "and I need to be absolutely certain before I do anything with the information." While Jasmine worked on Kevin, I continued my own investigation into Delilah's life. I started attending country club events as a guest of my parents, something I'd avoided for years. The club represented everything I'd rejected about their world, but now I needed to understand Delilah's domain. The first event was a charity luncheon supporting local schools. Delilah was in her element, moving through the crowd with practiced grace, air-kissing other women and laughing at the right moments. I watched her interact with different groups, noting who she embraced and who she subtly snubbed. A woman named Priscilla Chen tried to join a conversation Delilah was having with 3 other club members. Delilah's body language shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight turning of her shoulder, a fractional step that closed the circle. Priscilla stood there awkwardly for a moment before retreating. "Who was that?" I asked my mother later. "Priscilla. Her husband owns those Asian fusion restaurants downtown. Very successful." She trailed off meaningfully. "But they're new and the club has standards." I thought about that conversation for days. Standards was code. I realized code for the kind of exclusion my family practiced with surgical precision, cutting people out while maintaining plausible deniability. I started talking to service staff at the club. Waiters, bartenders, maintenance workers, people my family barely noticed. I chatted with them during events, asking casual questions, building rapport. One bartender, Marcus, mentioned that his wife, Sandra, worked in the club's membership office. "Must be interesting work," I said lightly, deciding who gets in. Marcus shook his head. "Sandra hates it sometimes. Says there are members who make her job difficult, asking her to do things that don't feel right." I filed that information away carefully. 2 months into the investigation, Jasmine handed me a folder. The folder was thick, filled with surveillance photographs, bank records, and a timeline of Kevin's activities. Jasmine had been even more thorough than I'd expected. "He's not particularly clever about it," she said as I flipped through the pages. Once I knew what to look for, the pattern was obvious. Same hotel, usually Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Separate credit card that he probably thinks your sister doesn't know about. The photos showed Kevin with Brittany Caldwell in various locations, restaurants, hotels, walking together in parks. In one image, his hand was on the small of her back as they entered a building. In another, they were kissing in his car. "She works for him?" I asked, reading through Brittany's background information. Sales representative at his largest dealership. Started there about 2.5 years ago. The affair seems to have begun around 6 months after she was hired, so they've been together for roughly 2 years now. I studied Brittany's photograph. She was pretty in a conventional way, young and fresh-faced. Nothing like Delilah, who was all sharp edges and careful maintenance. There's more, Jasmine said, pulling out another section of the folder. The financial records show regular transfers to an account in Brittany's name. He's also paying rent on an apartment in her name, bought her a car, ironically, from his own dealership. And there are charges for jewelry, clothing trips. How much? Total close to $300,000 over the past 2 years, maybe more. These are just what I could verify. I sat back processing the information. This was bigger than just an affair. Kevin was systematically moving marital assets to support his girlfriend. Money that belonged partly to Delilah and would have been earmarked for Olivia and Nathan's future. The apartment lease is interesting, Jasmine continued. It's in a building that his family's company owns, which means he's essentially paying himself rent with diverted business funds. That could be embezzlement depending on how the business is structured. Can you find out about the business structure? Already did. She slid more papers across the table. Kevin is a minority partner, but his father still controls the majority stake. Any significant financial decisions need board approval, which he definitely didn't get for these transfers. If his father found out, it could be grounds for removal from the company. I gathered all the documents carefully, my mind racing with possibilities. This was leverage, real leverage. But I needed more than just Kevin's affair. I needed something on Delilah, too. Something that would show everyone that their perfect marriage was built on rot from both sides. The next Sunday, I volunteered to help my mother organize donations for a club charity drive. It gave me an excuse to be at the club during the week, interacting with staff without arousing suspicion. I found Sandra during her lunch break sitting alone in the employee cafeteria. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and careful posture, someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. Mind if I sit? I asked. She looked surprised but gestured to the empty chair. We made small talk for a few minutes before I said, "Your husband Marcus mentioned you work in membership. That must be interesting." Her expression shifted, something guarded sliding into place. "It's a job. My sister, Delilah Montgomery, is very involved with membership decisions." Sandra's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Mrs. Montgomery has strong opinions about membership standards." The careful phrasing told me everything. I leaned forward, slightly lowering my voice. "Marcus mentioned you sometimes feel uncomfortable about things you're asked to do. If there's something wrong happening, I want to help." She studied my face for a long moment. "Why would you help?" "She's your sister. Because what's right matters more than family loyalty. And because I think you're being put in an impossible position." Sandra glanced around the cafeteria, checking who might overhear. Then she made a decision. "I keep copies," she said quietly, "of everything just in case I need to protect myself someday. Copies of what applications that were rejected for reasons that had nothing to do with qualifications. Emails from Mrs. Montgomery with instructions about which families to discourage. Notes from membership committee meetings where she said things that shouldn't be said." My heart rate quickened. "Would you be willing to share those copies if it would stop what she's doing?" "Yes, but I need protection. This job supports my family. I understand. Let me think about how to handle this properly." I wrote down my number. "Call me when you're ready. And Sandra, thank you for having the courage to document this." Over the next few weeks, I met with Sandra 3 more times. She provided me with a meticulously organized file of Delilah's discriminatory practices. Emails where Delilah referred to certain applicants as not our kind of people. Notes from meetings where she'd argued against families based on their ethnicity or economic background. Records of qualified applications that were mysteriously rejected after Delilah's involvement. It was damning evidence of systematic discrimination, and it had been happening for years. I also learned something else during this process. Several rejected families had noticed the pattern and were considering legal action, but they lacked proof. Sandra's documentation could support a legitimate lawsuit against the club and anyone personally involved in the discrimination, but I didn't use it. Not yet. During this time, Lucas started therapy. Not because of any crisis, but because I wanted him to have tools to process the subtle cruelty he'd been experiencing. Dr. Angela Morrison was wonderful with him, helping him understand that the problem wasn't with him, but with how others chose to treat him. After one of Lucas's sessions, Dr. Morrison asked to speak with me privately. "Lucas is doing well," she said, "but he's internalizing more than you might realize. He's developed coping mechanisms that concern me, making himself small, apologizing excessively, assuming blame for others' reactions because of my family." He didn't say that directly, but yes, I believe so. Children are remarkably perceptive about power dynamics. Lucas has learned that speaking up about his hurt causes problems for you, so he's decided it's better to stay quiet. The revelation hit me hard. I thought I was protecting him by maintaining family relationships by trying to model forgiveness and patience. Instead, I was teaching him that his pain mattered less than other people's comfort. "What should I do?" I asked. "That depends on what you want him to learn. Right now, he's learning that tolerating mistreatment is necessary for family acceptance. Is that the lesson you want him to carry into adulthood?" I drove home thinking about all the ways I'd been complicit in his suffering. Every time I'd smoothed over one of Delilah's comments, every family dinner I'd forced him to attend, every time I'd asked him to be patient with grandparents who allowed his abuse, I'd been teaching him that his dignity was negotiable. That night, I started planning in earnest, not just gathering information, but strategizing the perfect moment to deploy it. I needed something that would make my family confront their dysfunction in a way they couldn't rationalize or dismiss. The opportunity came when my mother mentioned the 40th anniversary party during one of our phone calls. This was 4 months after Lucas's birthday party, and I'd been methodically gathering evidence the entire time. "We're planning something special at the club," she said excitedly. "A celebration of family and commitment. Your father and I want all of you there. You, Delilah, the grandchildren. It's important to us." "Of course we'll be there," I said. And I meant it. Because this party, this celebration of their perfect family image, would be the ideal stage for truth. I spent the next 3 months preparing meticulously. I worked with a tech consultant to ensure I could connect my phone to the venue's projection system. I organized my evidence into a coherent presentation, photos, documents, records, all arranged to tell a clear story. I practiced timing, knowing I'd need to move quickly before anyone could stop me. I also prepared Lucas not for what would happen, but for the possibility that things with our family might change. "What if we didn't have to go to Sunday dinners anymore?" I asked him one evening while we made tacos together. He looked up from shredding cheese, hope and uncertainty mixed on his face. "Really, really? What if we only saw the family members who treat you kindly? Would that be okay with you? Would Grandma and Grandpa be mad?" "They might be, but you matter more to me than their feelings. You've always mattered more." He hugged me then, sudden and fierce, and whispered, "I don't like Sunday dinners. Everyone looks at me funny, and Aunt Delilah makes me feel bad." "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I made you keep going." "It's okay, Mom. You were trying, but it wasn't okay, and I'm done just trying. It's time to act." The week before the anniversary party, I had one final meeting with Sandra. She was nervous, knowing that providing this evidence could have repercussions for her. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Once this comes out, there's no taking it back. I'm sure, and Sandra, I promise you'll be protected. I've already spoken with a lawyer about whistleblower protections. What Delilah asked you to do was illegal. You're not the wrongdoer here." Some of those families she rejected, they have kids who wanted to swim here in the summer, take tennis lessons. I had to tell them no because Mrs. Montgomery said they wouldn't fit in. Her voice broke slightly. One mother asked me directly if it was because they were Black, and I had to lie to her face. "You were in an impossible situation, but now you're doing the right thing." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I hope your son appreciates what you're doing for him someday. He already does. That's why I have to see this through." Armed with this information, I waited. I needed the perfect moment, the right stage for my revelation. I needed Delilah to feel what Lucas had felt, humiliated in front of the people who mattered most. The days leading up to the party felt surreal. I went through normal motions: work, Lucas's school activities, grocery shopping, while carrying the weight of what I was about to do. Jasmine called twice to make sure I was certain about my plans. "There's no going back from this," she reminded me. "Once you expose them publicly, your family relationships will fundamentally change." "They're already fundamentally broken," I said. "I'm just making everyone acknowledge it." Kevin called me 3 days before the party, which was unusual enough to make me wary. "Grace, hey, it's Kevin. I wanted to talk to you about something." "What is it?" "It's about Delilah. She's been stressed lately, and I think she might say something at the party about Lucas and your situation. I just wanted to warn you." The audacity was almost impressive. Kevin was cheating on my sister with his employee and embezzling from his family business, and he was warning me about Delilah's potential behavior. "Thanks for the heads up," I said neutrally. "I know things have been tense between you two. For what it's worth, I think she crosses a line sometimes, but you know how she is. She thinks she's helping. Helping, right?" After we hung up, I wondered if Kevin sensed something coming. If some instinct warned him that his carefully constructed double life was about to collapse, but it didn't matter. He'd made his choices just like Delilah had made hers. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if the technology failed? What if my family turned on me instead of confronting their own behavior? What if Lucas got caught in the crossfire and ended up hurt worse than before? But then I remembered Dr. Morrison's words about what I was teaching Lucas by tolerating his mistreatment. I thought about all the future family gatherings where he'd have to shrink himself to fit into their narrow definition of acceptable. I imagined him as a teenager, then an adult, still carrying the shame they'd loaded onto him. No, whatever happened tomorrow, it would be better than continuing this pattern. The opportunity came at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party. They planned an elaborate celebration at the country club, the same one where Delilah wielded her influence. 200 guests, a live band, an open bar, and a seated dinner. My parents had spared no expense wanting to showcase their successful marriage, and by extension, their successful family. I wore a navy dress that Tyler had always loved, and I made sure Lucas looked sharp in his new suit. Delilah, of course, arrived in designer everything. Kevin at her side, playing the devoted husband Olivia and Nathan, perfect little reflections of their parents. During cocktail hour, Delilah cornered me by the bar. "I'm surprised you came," she said, sipping champagne. "These events can't be easy for you being alone." "I'm not alone. I have Lucas." "Yes, but it's not the same as having a real family, is it?" She glanced over at Lucas, who was talking with our cousin. "Poor thing, growing up without a father, with a mother who never married. People talk, you know. Do they?" "Of course. Everyone wonders what kind of example you're setting. What kind of values you're teaching him." She leaned closer. I worry about him, Grace. Children from broken homes often struggle, and a bastard child especially. That's an interesting word choice, I interrupted. You seem to use it a lot. Shame, she laughed. Well, if the shoe fits. Tell me something, Delilah. Does Kevin know about your discriminatory practices at the club? The families you've blackballed based on their background? Her smile faltered slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. And do you know about Brittany Caldwell? The color drained from her face. I thought we might have a conversation before dinner, I continued. Just the two of us. Maybe include Kevin. We have so much to discuss. I walked away, leaving her frozen by the bar. I could feel her eyes on my back, could imagine the panic setting in as she tried to figure out what I knew and how I knew it. Dinner was called, and everyone moved to the dining room. The space was beautiful, decorated in silver and gold with floral arrangements on every table. My parents sat at the head table with Delilah, Kevin, and a few other family members. I was seated nearby with Lucas. The speeches began after the main course. My father spoke about building a life with my mother, about the importance of family and legacy. My mother thanked everyone for coming and talked about how blessed she was. Then Delilah stood up. She was good at this, giving speeches, commanding attention. She talked about growing up with wonderful parents who taught her the value of commitment and tradition. She mentioned her own marriage, looking lovingly at Kevin, who smiled back with practiced ease. She talked about her children and the importance of providing them with stability and proper values. And then she looked at me. Of course, not everyone chooses the traditional path, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Some people make mistakes, but family means supporting each other. Even when our loved ones fall short of expectations, even when they have children in less than ideal circumstances. The room was quiet. People shifted uncomfortably. Lucas looked down at his plate, and my heart broke for him all over again. I stood up. You're right, Delilah, I said. Families should support each other. They should also be honest with each other. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue's projection system. The technical staff had been very helpful when I explained I wanted to show a surprise slideshow for my parents. The screen behind the head table flickered to life. Kevin, I said, could you explain to everyone who Brittany Caldwell is? The first image appeared. Kevin and Brittany at a restaurant, his hand on hers across the table. Delilah gasped. Kevin's face went white. That's from about 6 months ago, I narrated as more photos appeared. Here's one from their weekend in the Hamptons last July. Kevin told everyone he was at a dealership conference, didn't he? The room erupted in whispers. My mother stood up horrified. My father looked between the screen and Kevin with mounting fury. Grace stopped this immediately. Delilah hissed, but her voice shook. Oh, but we're just getting started, I said. More images appeared. Hotel receipts, bank transfers, text messages. Kevin has spent nearly $300,000 on his girlfriend over the past 2 years. Money he took from the family business. Kevin tried to speak, but nothing came out. Delilah's perfect facade crumbled before everyone's eyes. Her face twisted with shock and humiliation. But Delilah, I continued, you're not innocent either. The screen changed to show documents from the country club emails and records that Sandra had provided. These are records showing how my sister has systematically prevented families from joining this club based on race and economic status. She's violated discrimination laws and the club's own bylaws. Delilah was crying now, mascara running down her face. You vindictive witch, she spat at me. You have ruined everything. No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me, family, friends, colleagues of my parents. My sister has called my son a bastard at every family gathering for years. She's made his childhood a source of shame. She's punished him for the circumstances of his birth, something he had no control over, and all of you let her. I turned to my parents. You've prioritized appearances over everything else. You've allowed Delilah to abuse Lucas because addressing it would be uncomfortable because it would disrupt the perfect family image you've crafted. My mother was crying. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Lucas is the best thing that ever happened to me, I said, my voice breaking slightly. He's kind, creative, and loving. He deserves better than this family has given him, and I'm done pretending otherwise. I took Lucas's hand, and we walked out of the country club. Behind us, the party descended into chaos. I could hear raised voices, accusations flying, the sounds of Delilah's perfect life imploding. The aftermath was spectacular. Kevin's affair became public knowledge, which led to investigations into his business practices. He was removed from the family business and faced criminal charges for embezzlement. The divorce was ugly and expensive. The country club launched an investigation into Delilah's conduct. Several families came forward with complaints about being excluded or treated poorly. She was permanently banned from membership, a social death sentence in her circles. The club faced lawsuits that Delilah was named in personally. My parents were mortified. Their anniversary party became infamous for all the wrong reasons. My father's firm lost clients who didn't want to be associated with the scandal. My mother was quietly asked to step down from several charity boards. But the real consequences hit where it mattered most. Olivia and Nathan, Delilah's perfect children, had to leave their private school. The scandal followed them, and my sister couldn't afford the tuition without Kevin's income. Anyway, they ended up in public school experiencing the same challenges Lucas had faced. Delilah lost her house in the divorce and had to move into a small apartment. Her social circle evaporated. The friends who'd once praised her perfect family disappeared when that perfection proved to be a lie. My parents tried to repair things with me, but I kept them at arm's length. They could see Lucas occasionally supervised, but only if they treated him with the respect he deserved. It took months before I allowed unsupervised visits, and I made it clear that any hint of judgment or cruel comments would result in immediate removal from our lives. 6 months after the anniversary disaster, Delilah called me. Her voice was small, nothing like the confident tone she'd always used. "Can we talk?" she asked. We met at a coffee shop far from our old neighborhood. She looked different. Tired, older, humbled. Her designer clothes had been replaced with basics. Her hair needed touching up. Her manicure was gone. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble, "for everything, for what I said about Lucas, for how I treated you." I sipped my coffee waiting. "I was jealous," she admitted. "Your life looked messy from the outside, but you were happy. You loved Tyler, and then you loved Lucas, and you didn't care what anyone thought." Meanwhile, I was trapped in a loveless marriage following rules I didn't even agree with, trying to be perfect for parents who would never be satisfied. That doesn't excuse what you did to Lucas. I know nothing excuses it. Tears filled her eyes. He was an innocent child, and I took out my bitterness on him. I'm ashamed of myself. I studied her face looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was genuine remorse. Olivia asked me the other day why I was so mean to Lucas, Delilah continued. She said the kids at school call her names now, and she finally understands how it feels. She asked if that's how Lucas felt when I called him that word. And what did you tell her the truth? That I was wrong, that I hurt an innocent boy because I was unhappy with my own life, that I'm trying to be better. She wiped her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I didn't forgive her that day. Forgiveness would take time if it came at all, but I listened, and when she asked if she could apologize to Lucas directly, I agreed to consider it. That the with Lucas happened 3 months later in a therapist's office. Dr. Angela Morrison helped facilitate it, making sure Lucas felt safe and understood that nothing was his fault. Delilah apologized without excuses, explaining that her behavior reflected her own problems. Not anything wrong with him or his family. Lucas accepted her apology with grace that surprised me. He was 10 by then, old enough to understand complexity, young enough to still believe in redemption. Today, nearly 2 years after the anniversary party, my relationship with my sister is complicated but improving. She sees a therapist regularly and has acknowledged the harm she caused. She's working a regular job now, without the country club connections or the luxury lifestyle, and she seems more genuine than she ever was before. Olivia and Nathan spend time with Lucas occasionally. They're good kids who were as much victims of their mother's toxicity as anyone. They've adapted to their new circumstances, and I think they're better for it. My parents have slowly rebuilt bridges with me. They're more present grandparents to Lucas now, though they still struggle with letting go of their obsession with appearances. Old habits die hard, but at least they're trying. Kevin remarried Brittany, which was an interesting choice. Last I heard, his new car dealership venture wasn't doing well. Karma has its own timing. As for me and Lucas, we're thriving. I started my own graphic design business, which has grown steadily. Lucas is nearly 12 now, confident and creative, no longer carrying the weight of other people's judgments. He knows his worth, and more importantly, he knows he's loved completely and unconditionally. People sometimes ask if I regret what I did at the anniversary party. They frame it as going too far, being vindictive, destroying my family over words. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't destroy my family. My family was already broken. I just refused to keep pretending it wasn't. Delilah spent years weaponizing shame against my son. She used his very existence as a source of ridicule and moral superiority. She made him feel less than wrong somehow for being born, and my family enabled it because addressing the cruelty would have been uncomfortable. I made a choice to protect my child. I chose his well-being over my family's comfort. I chose truth over the pretty lies they'd wrapped themselves in. If that makes me vindictive, I can live with that. Because at the end of the day, Lucas doesn't flinch anymore when we go to family gatherings. He doesn't brace himself for insults disguised as concern. He walks into rooms with his head high, knowing he belongs just as much as anyone else. And Delilah never ever opens her mouth to call him that word again. Some people might say I went too far. That public humiliation was cruel, that I should have handled it privately, given my sister a chance to change on her own. But those people didn't watch their 9-year-old son learn what bastard meant. They didn't see him internalize shame for circumstances beyond his control. They didn't spend years listening to veiled insults and watching their family choose comfort over their child's dignity. I gave my sister years to change. Every time she made a comment, I had the opportunity to expose her then, but I stayed quiet, hoping she developed empathy on her own. She didn't. she escalated. So yes, I made sure everyone saw exactly who she was. I made sure there were consequences for years of cruelty. And I made sure that my son would never again have to endure her abuse in silence while our family looked away. Lucas asked me recently if I was happy. We were making dinner together and the question came out of nowhere, the way his deepest thoughts often do. Yes, I told him honestly. I am, even though Grandma and Grandpa were upset and Aunt Delilah lost her house. Especially because of that, I said sometimes people need to lose things before they can become better, and you needed me to protect you. That was more important than keeping peace. He thought about that while stirring the pasta sauce. Then he hugged me sudden and fierce. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. That moment made everything worth it. The family drama, the scandal, the ongoing complications of rebuilt relationships, all of it was worth seeing my son comfortable in his own skin, secure in the knowledge that someone would always fight for him. My sister learned a painful lesson about the consequences of cruelty. My parents learned that appearances aren't worth sacrificing your grandchildren. Kevin learned that betrayal catches up with you eventually. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be complicit in someone's abuse of your child, no matter who that someone is. Lucas will never be called a bastard at a family gathering again, not because my family suddenly developed better manners, but because they know now that I will burn down their perfect facade every single time they try to hurt my son, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.